Jakob Fugger was born in 1459 in the bustling city of Augsburg, Germany, into a family that was neither impoverished nor aristocratic, but ambitious and entrepreneurial. His father, Jakob Fugger the Elder, was a modest merchant who dealt in textiles, spices, and small-scale trade. While the family had connections in the local market, they were far from the powerful dynasties that ruled Europe. From an early age, Jakob observed the stark contrast between the lives of ordinary merchants and the opulence of princes, bishops, and nobles who seemed to command wealth with ease. These observations planted a seed in him. If he could master commerce and money, he could wield influence comparable to kings themselves. Young Jakob's education was rigorous for a boy of his station. He learned not only basic arithmetic but also accounting, the principles of trade, and the importance of reputation in business. Augsburg, during the late 15th century, was a vibrant hub of commerce and culture, connecting northern and southern Europe. Merchants from Italy, the Netherlands, and the German states met there, exchanging goods, ideas, and opportunities. This environment fascinated Jakob. He watched seasoned traders negotiate deals, noting how money could be leveraged into influence and how even small miscalculations could lead to ruin. Unlike other children who might have been content with modest family profits, Jakob displayed an early hunger for more knowledge, more connections, and ultimately, more power. The family's modest business provided Jakob with practical experience. He traveled with his father to various trade fairs, learning the art of negotiation, the importance of timing, and the subtle cues that signaled opportunity. He observed human nature closely, noting greed, fear, ambition, and loyalty, the same traits that would later shape his dealings with kings and emperors. But Jakob's ambitions were tempered with strategy. He was patient, understanding that his rise would require careful planning and calculated risks rather than impulsive actions. This period of Jakob's life also shaped his worldview. He saw that wealth was not merely a means of personal comfort, but a tool to influence the course of society. He recognized the limitations of mere physical strength or noble birth, realizing that money could open doors, sway decisions, and even determine the outcomes of wars and political alliances. He internalized the idea that true power lay in combining financial acumen with foresight and discretion, a lesson that would guide him throughout his career. By the time he reached adulthood, Jakob was already more knowledgeable and ambitious than most of his peers. He understood the value of networks, the importance of diversifying trade ventures, and the potential to expand the family business into something far greater than anyone had imagined. The foundations of his future empire were laid not through inheritance or luck, but through observation, discipline, and a relentless desire to rise above his humble beginnings. This phase of his life set the stage for the rise of a man who would one day become a banker more powerful than kings. As Jakob Fugger entered adulthood, he stepped fully into the family business, bringing with him a combination of keen intelligence, ambition, and an uncanny sense for opportunity. While the family had already established a modest trading network in textiles and spices, Jakob envisioned something far grander. He recognized that the true power lay not just in buying and selling goods, but in controlling the flow of capital itself. This insight marked the beginning of his transformation from a merchant's son into a figure who would eventually wield influence over kings and emperors. Jakob's first major ventures expanded the family business beyond traditional trade. He invested in mining operations, acquiring silver, copper, and other precious metals, which were in high demand across Europe. By controlling the supply of these resources, Jakob was able to not only increase his wealth, but also gain leverage over regions that depended on these materials for coinage, armaments, and trade. He was meticulous in his approach, personally supervising accounts, negotiating contracts, and studying market trends to ensure maximum profitability. Unlike many merchants of his time, Jakob combined ambition with discipline, ensuring that every move was calculated and sustainable. At the same time, Jakob began to extend his influence through banking. He realized that lending money to powerful nobles and rulers offered opportunities far beyond simple interest payments. Funding wars, marriages, and political campaigns allowed him to entangle himself in the web of European politics. Jakob's loans were not mere transactions. They were instruments of leverage. He carefully assessed the risks, evaluating the political stability of the borrower, the value of collateral, and the potential for long-term alliances. This strategic thinking set him apart from other merchants who treated loans as isolated deals rather than tools of influence. Jakob's reputation for reliability and shrewdness grew rapidly. Nobles and rulers began to court his services, knowing that a partnership with Fugger meant access to capital and economic expertise. He became known for his ability to structure complex deals that benefited both lender and borrower, a talent that further elevated his standing in the eyes of European elites. Through these relationships, Jakob positioned himself as more than a wealthy merchant. He became a trusted advisor, a financial architect behind the ambitions of powerful figures. Despite his growing influence, Jakob remained disciplined and calculating. He avoided unnecessary risks, diversified his investments, and maintained strict oversight of his ventures. His attention to detail, combined with his vision for expansion, allowed him to accumulate wealth at an unprecedented scale while simultaneously building the networks that would later enable him to shape politics and dynasties. By the end of this period, Jakob Fugger had transformed from a diligent merchant into a merchant prince, a man whose wealth and acumen could rival the power of kings. He had not yet reached the pinnacle of his influence, but the foundations were firmly in place: control over vital industries, strategic alliances with nobles, and a reputation for unmatched financial skill. This phase of his life set the stage for Jakob to leverage his growing fortune into political influence that would make him one of the most powerful figures in Europe. By the late 15th and early 16th centuries, Jakob Fugger had firmly established himself as a financial powerhouse in Europe. What set him apart from other merchants and bankers was his ability to recognize that money was not just a commodity, it was a tool for influence. This insight became the foundation of his next most ambitious phase: lending to kings, princes, and powerful nobles. Jakob's loans were no longer mere business transactions. They were instruments that could shape the political and economic landscape of the continent. Jakob began lending substantial sums to the Habsburg family, particularly to Maximilian I, who sought to consolidate power across the Holy Roman Empire. These loans were risky, entire kingdoms' fates hung on them, but Jakob's meticulous planning minimized potential losses. He demanded collateral whenever possible, often in the form of territorial rights, mining privileges, or trade concessions. Through this mechanism, he could exert influence far beyond simple financial gain. He was not just a lender. He was a silent partner in shaping Europe's political future. Every repayment, every default, and every negotiation became an opportunity to consolidate power and expand his influence. The scope of Jakob's financial reach quickly extended to other monarchs as well. Wars were expensive, and rulers frequently turned to him for funding military campaigns. By financing these conflicts, Jakob could indirectly control the course of wars without ever raising a sword. If a ruler relied on Fugger's capital, Jakob could subtly influence strategy, appointments, or treaties. In effect, he became a kingmaker, a man whose wealth and foresight could determine the rise or fall of dynasties. His understanding of the interplay between money, politics, and human ambition was unparalleled, allowing him to navigate the complex and often treacherous waters of European power. Jakob's strategy was underpinned by meticulous record-keeping, risk assessment, and an acute awareness of human nature. He recognized the ambitions, weaknesses, and temperaments of the rulers he dealt with, tailoring each loan to maximize both profit and influence. He avoided overexposure, diversified his portfolio across kingdoms, and positioned himself as indispensable to multiple rulers simultaneously. His fame for reliability and discretion spread rapidly, ensuring that even those skeptical of his methods eventually sought his services. However, Jakob's financial dominance also drew scrutiny and envy. Competitors accused him of overreaching, while some nobles feared the influence that a single banker could wield over their affairs. Yet Jakob navigated these challenges with the same precision he applied to his finances, using alliances, diplomacy, and careful timing to maintain his position. He understood that influence built on money was as much about perception and trust as it was about actual capital. By the end of this phase, Jakob Fugger had become far more than a wealthy merchant. He had evolved into a pivotal figure in European politics. Kings and princes depended on him, wars were financed by him, and the course of nations could be subtly guided through his loans. Through these calculated, high-stakes dealings, Jakob demonstrated that financial power could rival, and often surpass, the authority of kings themselves, a legacy that would define his life and the era he shaped. By the time Jakob Fugger reached the peak of his career, he had amassed extraordinary wealth, but he understood that money alone was insufficient to wield true power. Influence required subtlety, strategy, and the ability to shape perception. Jakob's genius lay in his mastery of what might be called the art of influence, using financial resources to bend politics, the church, and even society to his advantage, often without overt force. This phase of his life illustrates how he became more than a banker. He became a man capable of subtly steering the course of Europe. One of Jakob's most notable strategies was his relationship with the Catholic Church. During the early 16th century, the Church wielded immense power over Europe, and indulgences, the selling of forgiveness for sins, were a major source of revenue. Jakob recognized an opportunity. He financed the purchase of indulgences and loans for church leaders, gaining both profit and leverage. While controversial, this allowed him to influence high-ranking clergy, positioning himself as a trusted and indispensable financier. By controlling the flow of money into church projects, he could indirectly shape decisions at the highest levels of ecclesiastical power, further extending his reach beyond secular rulers. Jakob also mastered the art of political influence. Through careful lending to rulers such as the Habsburgs, he gained more than just financial returns, he obtained political leverage. He advised on marriages, succession plans, and territorial disputes, ensuring that his interests were aligned with the ruler's goals. For example, by funding military campaigns or providing emergency loans, Jakob could sway decisions that would otherwise have been out of his hands. His influence was subtle, rarely overt, yet always effective, allowing him to shape outcomes while maintaining the appearance of neutrality or benevolence. Strategic marriages and alliances were another tool in his arsenal. Jakob used his family to create bonds with other influential merchants and nobles, extending his network of loyalty and trust. These alliances reinforced his social and political power, enabling him to operate at a level far above most merchants. Every relationship was carefully cultivated and every transaction considered for its long-term strategic value. Despite the immense power he wielded, Jakob maintained an image of piety and respectability. He built churches, funded charitable projects, and supported educational institutions. These acts not only cemented his legacy, but also legitimized his influence in the eyes of society. People saw him as a man of principle, which made them more willing to accept his guidance and financial support. In this way, Jakob understood that influence was as much about perception as it was about capital. Through these combined strategies, financial leverage, political counsel, church involvement, strategic alliances, and public philanthropy, Jakob Fugger transformed himself from a wealthy merchant into a figure whose decisions could shape nations. He had mastered the art of influence, demonstrating that the control of money, when coupled with insight, diplomacy, and foresight, could rival the authority of kings. In essence, Jakob's genius lay not just in acquiring wealth but in using it to quietly, effectively, and strategically guide the destiny of Europe. As Jakob Fugger reached the height of his influence, he turned his attention beyond mere accumulation of wealth and political leverage. He began to consider the mark he would leave on the world, the tangible and enduring legacy of a life that had been defined by ambition, strategy, and unparalleled financial acumen. This phase of his life, often described as the legacy in stone and gold, demonstrates how Jakob sought to immortalize his power and influence through both architecture and societal contributions, ensuring that the Fugger name would be remembered long after his death. Jakob's investments extended to grand construction projects and patronage of religious and cultural institutions. He funded the building and restoration of churches, monasteries, and chapels, many of which still stand as testaments to his wealth and taste. These projects served multiple purposes. On a spiritual level, they demonstrated his piety and devotion to the Catholic Church, earning him respect among clergy and laypeople alike. Politically and socially, they reinforced his status as a man whose influence went beyond finance into culture, education, and civic life. These monuments were not mere vanity projects, they were strategic statements, signaling that the Fugger family was both powerful and morally upright. Education and social welfare also featured prominently in Jakob's vision of legacy. He funded scholarships, schools, and charitable initiatives, ensuring that future generations would benefit from his wealth. In doing so, he cultivated loyalty and admiration, creating a network of gratitude that extended across social classes and regions. By investing in human capital, Jakob not only improved the lives of countless individuals, but also strengthened the social fabric that supported his commercial and political ventures. This combination of philanthropy and strategy highlighted his understanding that true power was as much about shaping society as it was about controlling money. Jakob's mining and banking empire also became part of his lasting legacy. He had strategically invested in copper, silver, and other precious metals, ensuring that his family retained control over essential resources for generations. His careful management, diversification, and foresight transformed the Fugger enterprise into a dynasty, one that could sustain its influence even after his death. The wealth he amassed allowed his heirs to continue wielding economic power that rivaled kingdoms, making the Fugger name synonymous with both affluence and strategic genius. Despite his enormous wealth, Jakob remained a disciplined and thoughtful figure, aware that legacy was more than material accumulation. He understood that history would judge him not only by the fortune he left behind, but also by the institutions, culture, and societal structures he shaped. His influence permeated European politics, commerce, and religion, leaving a footprint that was both visible in stone and enduring in impact. In essence, Jakob Fugger's legacy in stone and gold represents the culmination of a life dedicated to mastery over wealth, influence, and society. He transformed money into power, power into societal change, and societal change into lasting memory. By the time of his death in 1525, Jakob had ensured that his name would endure as more than a wealthy banker. It would symbolize strategic brilliance, cultural patronage, and a legacy that outlived even the kings he once influenced. By the final phase of his life, Jakob Fugger had reached a level of wealth and influence unparalleled in Europe. Often called Jakob the Rich, he had become a figure whose power rivaled that of kings and emperors, not through armies or titles, but through the strategic use of money. This final chapter of his story, The man who controlled Europe illustrates how a single banker could shape the political, economic, and social trajectory of an entire continent. Jakob's influence stemmed from his ability to finance rulers at critical moments. Monarchs and princes depended on him to fund wars, marriages, territorial acquisitions, and even the day-to-day administration of their realms. For example, the Habsburg dynasty relied heavily on his loans to consolidate power and expand their dominions. Because these rulers were indebted to him, Jakob could subtly guide decisions, sway negotiations, and even influence succession plans. He became a kingmaker in the truest sense. While he never sat on a throne, his council and capital determined who would hold power and how effectively they could exercise it. But Jakob's reach extended beyond individual rulers. Through control of key mining operations and access to precious metals, he influenced the European economy at large. The availability of silver, copper, and other resources shaped coinage, trade, and warfare. By strategically investing in mining and controlling the distribution of these resources, Jakob positioned himself as a central figure in the financial ecosystem of Europe. Nations' fortunes, wars' outcomes, and trade networks were all indirectly shaped by his decisions, making him indispensable to the continent's political and economic stability. Jakob also demonstrated a remarkable understanding of human nature and diplomacy. He carefully maintained relationships with multiple rulers simultaneously, ensuring that no single ally could dominate him or threaten his influence. He combined discretion with shrewd calculation, understanding that power built on perception and trust was often more enduring than sheer wealth. His advisory role extended into strategic marriages, political alliances, and church financing, further solidifying his sway over the decisions of both secular and religious authorities. Despite wielding immense power, Jakob remained disciplined, focused, and forward-thinking. He invested in public works, religious institutions, and educational initiatives, ensuring that his legacy would outlast him. By building institutions, funding churches, and fostering social goodwill, he secured not only the wealth but also the reputation of the Fugger family for generations. This careful balancing of personal ambition, public service, and strategic finance exemplified his unique approach to influence. When Jakob died in 1525, Europe had been profoundly shaped by his actions. His wealth and vision had allowed him to operate in a space traditionally reserved for monarchs. Unlike kings who relied on armies or inherited titles, Jakob's authority derived from his ability to wield money with foresight, discretion, and intelligence. In life, he controlled kingdoms and empires. In death, he left behind a financial and cultural dynasty that would continue to shape Europe for decades. He had proven that, in the hands of a master strategist, money could rival and even surpass the power of crowns and swords.